The following is an AZPM original production.
For AZPM, I'm Mark McLemore, and this is Arizona Spotlight. Coming up, we'll highlight the works of three compelling women from our community who are each storytellers, sharing true experiences along with detailed observations about the complex world that surrounds us. Lydia Millet, the acclaimed novelist, has taken her first dive into nonfiction with We Loved It All, subtitled A Memory of Life. We talk about the detailed connections that exist between science, history, animals, our families, and the looming specter of extinction. Molly McCloy has achieved success in the world of live oral storytelling, both locally and at Moth Story Slams in Phoenix and New York. She walks a tightrope between comedy and tragedy, and her only safety net is sincerity. Those stories are next on Arizona Spotlight. I'm really not sure how to describe the book We Loved It All, the latest by critically acclaimed Tucson-based author Lydia Millet. It's a free-ranging but never sloppy account of Millet's own life, including her family, growing up, relationships, and motherhood, connected to stories about science, animals, mythology, history, art, and our now severely impaired ecosystem. It is funny, bittersweet, and sometimes shocking in its clarity of thought. I spoke with Lydia Millet for the first time in more than 10 years by telephone from Tucson to Maine.
Well, I'm so accustomed to writing fiction where you have many filters, and you also have this kind of plausible deniability of your own direct connection to, say, the characters you've made up or the emotional impulses behind a narrative. And I just felt like doing something that felt unfiltered to me, that was in a way more direct, and that was something new. I write a fair number of books, and I don't like the idea of repeating myself, although we all do repeat ourselves, of course. We can't help it. But I always like to try to do something that is, I guess, outside, if not my comfort zone, my zone of familiarity, like my neighborhood. And so this was a little actually outside my neighborhood, and it was an adventure.
But I think you do a great job of avoiding predictability in your writing. The way the chapters would end was always surprising. I didn't see it coming. And also how it would go from world history and natural history to family history. Did you have any idea how many facets this book was going to have when you began the journey of it?
I didn't really. At a certain moment, I thought it would be sort of a bestiary, a kind of personal bestiary that would be organized quite differently with all these encounters, even tiny encounters, that I've had, that all of us have with other kinds of creatures in our daily life, from ants to cockroaches to, rubber ficus in the living room. And so I started out sort of that way, but it didn't work because it was too encyclopedic. It didn't really work as an approach. And finally, I had to cut about half of the book out to try to distill it down into what was published. Even now, it's sort of a long book for me. I admire short books. I like to read short books, and I really prefer to write short books. And the shorter something is, the less of an opportunity you have to screw up in certain ways. And it was also hard for me to know where to put myself into the story. I felt that I needed a character that ended up being me to sort of, be the skeleton of the flesh of the book. Mm-hmm. But I'm uncomfortable writing about myself. I'm not accustomed to writing about myself. It felt egotistical at first. And because I always write about made up people, and I've very seldom written directly from life, literally from life in any kind of way. And so I admire nonfiction writers who just easily slip into this narrative persona, this other version of themselves. But that that wasn't me. It was sort of difficult to find the suit that fits for a while, and to know how much to include and how much to get rid of.
Something that comes up again and again in the book is when you write about animals, you write about them in a very soulful way. You're very respectful of their souls. Just recently, Jane Goodall shared how her first encounter with the soul of an animal was a dog that they had on their farm or wherever it was that she grew up. And learning to communicate with this dog taught her a lot that she carried with her forward. And she has never questioned the idea that animals have souls. And in this book, not only was I hearing about lonely animals and animals that had great reason to be sad, but also the concept of animal suicide, which was something that I've never heard anybody discuss before.
Animal suicide and animal executions and how we construe those things, what is suicide even? For example, like we can't use the word murder when we talk about animals usually. As journalists, the Associated Press and AP Style, and I say this, from my work as a copy editor, it's not correct because that is a legal term reserved for Homo sapiens and our intentions and actions against each other. But I think there's so much in our vocabulary, and a lot of this book is about the words we use and the language we use, and creatures who don't have language and creatures who do. I mean, I have to agree, with Goodall, really, that I never doubted the subjectivity of other animals. It never occurred to me, really, to see animals as the objects that I think our culture and capitalism tend to designate them as. I think we have, as individuals, systemically, we allow ourselves to be alienated from them and objectify them and make them mechanical in the Cartesian way because we want to use them, right?
There's a real focus in your book on animals who become the last of their species and what that means in the different contexts, whether it can be directly traced to human intervention or if it's a little more oblique than that. I was always fascinated by the film of the thylacine. And when you mentioned that early in the book, it really got me interested because seeing the film of a creature that is now largely believed to be extinct, although, there are occasional sightings.
Yes, recently, right. Allegations, yeah.
Allegations, that's good. And a creature that is so unusual, as you say, it's called the Tasmanian tiger, but it more closely resembles a dog, but it has a mouth like a crocodile. I mean, it's a strange looking beast. And
it is. It's extraordinary. And the mouth really seemed to sort of hinge open as though the jaw was differently jointed or something from a dog's, didn't it, when you watch that film?
You bring up the fact that is one of the few examples that we have of a actual recording of a now extinct creature, because so many creatures went extinct before the age of photography.
Yeah, and so we have all kinds of ways of memorializing them. And now, of course, the problem is more often that all these extinctions are taking place in the background that we don't directly witness. We know they're happening. But often, an extinction isn't confirmed for decades after the last sighting of an individual. In fact, that's the correct way to do it. These events are occurring in the world, and we don't see them. And there are some famous cases that, as you know, I write about fairly briefly in the book of endlings who've become these celebrities of whom we do have footage or other kinds of bits of visual record. The thylacine is the first one I know of on film. And it is a sort of heartbreaking clip. And of course, it's been everything about the last thylacine. And there's still controversy about whether the last one was a female or a male. And there was still these, just a short time ago, very well fabricated video, anyway, assuming that it was a hoax. Very well put together video of a supposed thylacine sighting on the side of a road.
How did you know when you had reached an end point? Now, you said you cut a lot of the book in the editing stage, but I wonder what felt like the capstone to you that made you feel that this book was ready to go out into the world.
I think that in general with my books, I just come to feel allergic to them at a certain point almost. I'm exhausted by the engagement with a particular world or narrative. I can't see it clearly anymore. So then I have to walk away and give it to other people to look at. I can't do more with it at that moment. I do think that I could go back and abridge and edit old books, given enough time and desire. I could make them better, but in the sort of continuity of time of working on a book, yeah, you have to step away because just frankly, you get sick of it.
Lydia Millet's book is We Loved It All, A Memory of Life, published by Norton. On Saturday, August 3rd, Lydia Millet will offer a reading and a Q&A at the Tucson Desert Museum. It's part of an event called Save Our Saguaros. The evening begins around 6:30 and will feature music, all ages events, and a talk by Emmanuel Bernal, a botanist and horticulturist from Hermosillo. There's something very powerful about a single voice sharing a true story. It gives a chance for the storyteller's personality to shine and possibly forge new connections with anyone who is listening. In support of this important community tradition, Arizona Spotlight is featuring a different storyteller on the third Thursday of every month. Here's Tony Paniagua to introduce July's special guest.
Thank you, Mark. Our storyteller this month is Tucson resident Molly McCloy, who is originally from Phoenix but has also lived in Flagstaff and other places out of state. Molly is an award-winning storyteller and author who teaches writing at Pima Community College. Before her story, let's learn more about her accomplishments in this interview. Molly McCloy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tony.
Among other things, you are a 4-time Moth Story Slam winner, and we should point out that the Moth Hour airs on NPR right here at 89.1 FM in Tucson. How can you explain the process?
Okay, so a Moth Slam is an open event, and anyone can enter. And so you show up before the show, and you put your name in the hat. And the requirements for the story is you can't read it, and you can't have any notes or any props. It's got to be under 5 minutes. You could fudge on that a little, though. And it also has to be a true story from your life on the night's theme.
And you've driven to Phoenix, and one of the things that it makes you really nervous is that you don't know if you're going to be telling a story. Just because you drive up there and put your name in there does not mean you are going to be chosen, right?
Tony, it's excruciating but very effective because it keeps everybody in the room because they're pulling the names one at a time out of the hat. So I have sat for the entire evening without getting pulled. I have sat and then I got pulled as the 10th, like the very last person. So I really enjoy the Moth Story Slams. It's a really effective organization tool. It keeps everybody in the room, keeps everybody on the edge of their seat. And then if your name doesn't get pulled, you actually get to stand up and read the first line of your story so everybody can see what they missed. So it's a really nice, open community event, and it's competitive, but the competition's not quite the point either.
What inspired you to get into writing, and not only writing, but storytelling? Because you have been very successful at that. How did you get into this track?
You know, it's kind of interesting. I was doing fiction and poetry, and then I sold my house and moved to Philly and was hanging out just writing, and a friend of mine said, oh, well, your nonfiction is much better than what you've been doing. So I ended up going to the news school, and my professor there said, you should try doing the Moth. It's a really good way to promote your writing, which is the way I thought about it for a while. I thought, okay, I was a shy person. I never did speech and debate in high school. I never did drama, and I thought, okay, this is just a way to promote my writing, and I'm a shy writer. And I got up and did the Moth the first time and didn't do so well, but then the second time I won my Moth Slam, and then I was hooked at that point. And then there was still kind of this process of me being sort of deadpan for a while and just considering it something I had to do to promote the writing. But the real turnaround came when I realized I really like this, and I started to really get into it, and I started to be a little bit more energetic on stage and really be starting to enjoy myself doing it. And I realized, oh, I've kind of switched over here. This is my main thing now, this performance stuff. So.
And in addition to your storytelling, you've also written books, and you've been recognized for those accomplishments as well.
Yeah, so I took the one-woman show concept and turned it into a memoir called Nine Grudges, The Spiteful Origins of the Happiest Dyke on Earth. And in October, I won the book pipeline contest for an unpublished manuscript and won some cash from them, and they're helping me find an agent. And so that was really exciting for me. And so now I'm also simultaneous to the storytelling. I'm on this publication journey with my first book, which is a memoir.
Molly, you have used comedy frequently in your stories, but right now you are getting ready to teach a trauma writing class. I know this is a topic that's quite timely because many people are dealing, coping, and healing with their own personal trauma.
In 2015, I had a sabbatical, and I locked myself into the project of doing a one-woman show. And I worried that it was going to be too difficult for the audience to have a show about my childhood trauma. The show was, at that point, called Mad Dog Grudges. And it was about when I was 22, I wrote my dad a letter, and I said, I want you to apologize for these 9 things. So I was a little worried that, was I doing nothing but dragging people through the 9 worst moments of my life? But as I worked on the project, I discovered a number of key elements that helped me to tell the story in a way that created community instead of sort of driving people off, which is the danger of telling stories about trauma. And I'd like to share those concepts in the course I'm doing. But one of them is the use of humor, and the use of humor even in dark moments to diffuse the situation. And I'd say another key principle is agency, and making sure that the story's not just about what's happening to you, which would be a horror story, but about what you want and what you're doing, which makes it a little bit more of an adventure story. So those are some of the key principles that I figured out about writing about trauma.
When you were growing up as a little girl in Phoenix, you had brothers. I remember you telling that in a story. Did you ever think you'd be in the situation that you are right now with books and wins and story slams and different things like that? As a teacher at a community college?
There were a couple different things I saw myself doing as a little kid. When I was in junior high, I really wanted to be on Saturday Night Live. And so I feel like when I get on stage and I'm making people laugh, I'm hitting kind of close to that. I also just wanted to be a kid's librarian, telling stories to kids. So I'm kind of hitting close to that too. And yeah, eventually once I hit high school and college, I did want to write a book, but for a while I thought maybe it was going to be poetry or fiction. I didn't understand for a while that it was going to be a memoir.
So you never were thinking about being an astronaut or a doctor or something like that?
No, never an astronaut. Not even a veterinarian. I know almost all the kids want to be a veterinarian, but not even that really. But yeah, I think I just wanted to make people laugh.
Molly McCloy, thanks for joining us, and congratulations on accomplishing your goal of making people laugh. In her story, McCloy mentions 2 famous Sesame Street Muppets you may remember. Ernie is a fun-loving and energetic extrovert, while his roommate Bert is a quieter and more reliable introvert.
So I'm in Phoenix in the late 90s at a downtown art gallery, back when downtown there was totally deserted. And I'm doing some performance art. I can't remember what it was, except that we were using maxi pads to antagonize people. They were brand new, clean maxi pads fresh out of the wrapper, but maybe that was the problem. Maybe our concept wasn't edgy enough. That night, our feminist performance was not celebrated with the enthusiasm we had hoped for. My partner in art crimes was someone I'll call Jay. We were both in our mid-20s, but Jay had been smoking since she was 11, so she sounded like this. Jay and I sometimes did a lesbian Ernie and Bert performance that was more successful. Except I had to be Bert. And worse yet, one time Jay pointed out that my own personality, not just as an artist, but as a person, was actually more like Bert's. "You think you're Ernie, but you're really Bert," she said. This was like an arrow through my heart. No one wants to be Bert, the sad sack who always gets punked. Everyone wants to be Ernie, the joker pulling off the pranks. But Jay was right about me. I was punked daily at a job I hated, and performance art was never going to pay my rent. So anyway, I'm already feeling a little down on this particular night at the art gallery when someone gets on the mic and announces that cars parked in the alley are being ticketed. So I go out there, and there's this row of 4 cars with a cop ticketing the last car. Jay's car is going to get ticketed next. And then there's a random person's car, and then my car. So I could easily save my own car. I could just drive away because this one cop has to write out 3 tickets before he gets to me. But then I think, hey, that MaxiPad performance piece didn't really fly, but I could still be a hero. I'm going to save Jay's car, too. The cop makes his move toward Jay's car, but I pull out my car key like her car is mine. I don't say a word. I just nod at the cop and pretend to put my key in Jay's car door. Time slows down and freezes. The cop's face looks huge as he glares at me. His bushy eyebrows, his gray beard. He's watching me as I'm about to turn the key in the wrong lock. I'm sure I'm going to get busted. Then the cop shrugs. He doesn't write Jay a ticket because he's convinced I'm moving the car. He walks up to the next car and starts ticketing that one. I'm not sure what to do next. But right then, Jay comes out of the art gallery door, so I wave her over and she walks quickly around the cop, and I walk around him too. And while he's still ticketing that middle car, Jay and I move like we're in some choreographed dance. We both hop in our own cars, start them up, and flick on our headlights. The best part is the surprised look on the cop's face, in my rearview mirror, in the glow of Jay's headlights. I smile, because this was my best performance of the year, a moment when I got to be Ernie instead of Bert.
For more information about Molly, you can visit the Arizona Spotlight website or go to mollymccloy.com. Join us next month for another interesting story from a member of our community. For Arizona Spotlight, I'm Tony Paniagua.
Thank you for listening to Arizona Spotlight. This show is a production of AZPM. The production engineer is Jim Blackwood. Production assistance by Alicia Vasquez. I'm producer and host Mark McLemore.
AZPM podcasts are made possible in part by donations from listeners like you. Learn more at support.azpm.org. Thank you.